Hello everyone, welcome to today's presentation. Today we are going to look at creating a REDCap form using the web designer. We will carry out a practical session showing you all the steps that will be involved in creating the form. The presentation will be divided into two sections. Part 1, we'll create the project. We'll develop a data collection form using the web designer approach. And then part 2, we will demonstrate how to enter data using the tool and also all the other aspects that are involved in saving the form. And then we will push the project into production. Finally, we will demonstrate how to retrieve data from REDCap for statistical analysis. Welcome and enjoy the session. So we have a template form which we are going to create in REDCap. So this is a household demographic survey form and it has several sections. The first section is the instruction section, and then we have the demographic information section. Here we will fill in the participant information, and then we have the water and sanitation section, and then we have the last part as the pain management section. So each of these questions is as outlined. So we have the interview date, which will be a date question, and then we have the time of the interview, which is the time. Then we have the question asking whether the consent form was signed, which is a binary response. It's a yes or no question. Then for the demographic information section, we have the participant ID, the details of the participant, that includes the names of the participant, telephone number if they have, date of birth, age in complete years, gender, which is also a binary function question, and then we have the ethnic race, which is select one, where you have all these options that needs to be programmed in REDCap. Then we have marital status, where each of the participant is expected to declare their marital status. They could be married, single, widowed, divorced, separated, and so on. And then if someone is married, then they need to declare how many wives they have. Then the second section, which will be the water and sanitation section. The first question is, what is your source of drinking water for your household? And anyone can select any of the available options, multiple select. And then what kind of toilet does your household have? This is a single select question where only one option is allowed. Then the last section is the pain management section, where you have 4 questions. The first question is, have you ever experienced pain in the last 6 months? It's a binary question. And then if this person has ever experienced pain, then what was the pain score? So here we would be expected to put a slider and show the magnitude of the pain. The question that follows up is, what did you do to manage your pain? So these are options. They could be a single select or multiple select depending on the situation. Then finally we would expect the interviewer name to be captured on REDCap. So in a nutshell, that is the outline of our household demographic survey questionnaire, which, like I said, has 3 sections, and each one of these sections has several questions in it. So right now let's go straight into the REDCap platform. We'll create a project and go straight into demonstrating how to create this form using the web designer approach. So to access the REDCap platform, you will need to have a username and a password, and in this case I have my username and then my password. So once you manage to log in into the REDCap, the first thing that you need to do is to create a project, and in this case our project is titled Household Survey. And then the purpose of this project is for operational support, and then we are required to put in the project notes, and these are optional, but for our case we'll need to put those instructions. So we go back to the questionnaire and pick the project notes as outlined in the household questionnaire. So here are the project notes. So we can copy all these statements, copy, then paste them there, and then after we've done that, then we request REDCap to provide us with an empty project. So once you have created your project, from our previous presentation, then you have all these options that are available for you to ensure that the project runs. So we have the project home, project setup, we have the designer option which we are going to use today, and right now the project status is on development. We can always retrieve the dictionary. I will show you how to do that, and then how to derive the code book from the project. So when it comes to adding records, we will use the add/edit records to put in our records, and then I will show you how to use these other tools to manage your project. So right now we want to do the form development using the online designer. So realize that our project as of now is not under production, so I'll show you how to push the project into production. So we click on the online designer, and then this will give us a blank form. However, we need to change the name of this form to what we are working on. So we can rename the form by clicking on the rename button, and instead of having the form called as form 1, we will call this form as household questionnaire. And then once we have put in the name, the next thing is to save the name so that it can be recorded into our form. So the next thing, since we are using the web designer, this is an easier way of making the forms. So you can click on the form. Now we are ready to add in fields in the form. So to add a new field, then we have these different tabs at the bottom of the form. So the first is the record ID, and then if you click on add field, REDCap gives you a provision to add the type of field that you need. So I have modified my screen so as you can be able to see the form, and also you can also be able to see the actions that I'm taking on the REDCap. So I want to create a new field, and this will be the interview date. So from REDCap, I will select the text box option, and then I will create the interview date option. So the easiest way is to copy and paste from the shared questionnaire. So the field label will be our question label. We'll type in their interview date, and then we can give this variable a variable name. So remember from our previous presentation, the variable name should not have capital letters and it should not start with numbers. So this is question 1, and it is interview date. And then since this one is a date function, then we will put here instructions that the respondent should put this as a date. We do not have at the moment a minimum date or even a maximum date. However, we would wish to have this field as a required field, and then it is not an identifier. However, we want to remind the person entering this information to indicate this date in the format of day, month, and year. So indicate the interview date in the format of day, month, and year. Then once that has been done, then we can click save. So that way we have created a question on the interview date. It is a text function, and then someone can use the calendar to choose the date from. So if it is January 23rd 2022, then by clicking on that, then you're able to fill in the date in the expected format. Then the next question is the time of the interview in 24 hours. So we click the add field function, and then we still retain the text box which accommodates short text, number, date, and time. And then we want to put in the field name as interview time. Yes. And then the variable name here will be question 1 interview time, and then the validation, so this should be time in hours and minutes. We don't have the minimum time, and then we need this field to be a required field, and then we can remind the person entering this information to enter time in 24-hour clock. Then we save. So that way we have a new field where it's the time of interview, and in case you've made a mistake, you can always edit back. So you can click here and then change this to hours. then you can save again. Now you have interview time in hours, and then enter the time in 24-hour clock system. Then the next question is, has the consent form signed? So add a field. This time round we have a binary response question where the responses should all either be yes or no. So we will have to change the field type from text box to multiple choice radio buttons, but in this case we will need the respondent only to provide only a single answer. So you click on that and then copy the question as outlined, copy and then paste. Has the consent form been signed? Then the variable name here would be question 2 and then underscore consent form signed. It's a required field. And then since we want to provide options for this question, which are already provided in the questionnaire, so we will highlight those two. We copy and then paste here. So we want to separate these two. This is a single select question where the first response is yes and the second response is no. And then we want to make this question required and then remind that the participant can only respond to the questions if they have given the consent to participate in this survey, and then save. So this creates a new question where the respondent needs to ascertain that the consent has been given, and we have provided them with the field notes to remind them that the participant can only respond to the questions if they have given consent to participate in the survey. Now the next question is in the section on demographic information section, where we have participant ID, first name, last name, and so on. So we will need to start by including the participant ID as a new field. So here we have the participant ID, and this is a free text, so we will choose a text box, and then showed you an easier way is to copy the question, then paste it on REDCap. This saves you a lot of time. This is question 1 in section B, which is a participant ID. This is a required field, and then here you can have the field note as participant ID. Save. So between the participant ID and the informed consent signed, we need to remind the interviewer that they have gotten into a new section. So we can add a section label here. So begin a new section with an optional text. Then we highlight the demographic information section, copy, then paste and save. So for some reason you cannot create a section before you have included the questions under that section. So we can proceed on by filling in the rest of the questions. So we follow the same route. So we add field. Now we have question on the first name. So this first name will be in the short text section. So we just copy here first name, copy, paste. And then this is question 2 underscore first name. It's a required field. There is no validation. Then here you can just say first name. Then that gives the participant chance to put in their first name, add a field, the same text box. Then we have last name. This is question 3. We have last name, make it required, and then here last name, save. Then the next one is the telephone number, question number 4. So copy, add a new field, paste telephone number. It's still text box. So this is question 4, tel number. So we have question 4 underscore tel underscore number, and then we will restrict this to an integer. it is a required field, and then we can say that this is the telephone number, participant's telephone number, then save. So you can see the field notes are clearly outlined there, and this will guide the participant to fill in their telephone number. Then the next question is the date of birth. So this one still lies under a short text box. So we have date of birth, and then we have here question number 5 underscore date of birth. So you need to validate this. It ought to be in the format of day, month, year. Then it is a required field. Then we have here date of birth. You can select the date by which the minimum day should be, but for this case we just want to leave it open, and then save. So next is age in complete years. Again, we want to retain it as a short text box, and then copy this information, copy age in complete years, copy, then paste as the field label. Then you can say this is question 6, then underscore age. The number here should be an integer, and it is a required field. Then we can remind the person entering this data to enter age in complete years. Now, if you want to ensure that your participants are aged between 18 and above, you can put the minimum age as 18 and the maximum age to be 150, and then save this. And then gender, copy, and then create a new field. So this time around, gender, one has either to be male or female. So we need to adjust this to be a radio button, and then we put in the field label as gender, and then question variable name, question number 7 underscore gender. Then click on this field to be required, and then the options could either be male or female, and then save. So REDCap will alert you when the raw values for choices were added automatically, and in this case you have male has been assigned to 1 and female has been assigned to 2, which is fine. Then you save your question. Then the next question is on ethnic race. So we have ethnic race, copy the question label, then paste, and then here you can only acquire one race. So we will retain multiple choice radio buttons for single answer only. This is question number 8, which is race. Then it is a required field. Now, for the sake of saving on time, we can copy the options that we have instead of typing all this. You can copy, paste, and then rearrange your options. So we have the first option as white, the second one is black or African American, the third one is Asian, the fourth is Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, the fifth one is American Indian or Alaskan Native, and the sixth one is other. So in case someone has other race, then they can specify that. So notice that REDCap will assign numeric values for each one of these when you hit the tab on saving. So you can see we have 1 has been assigned to white, 2 has been assigned to black or African American, 3 has been assigned to Asian, and so on until when you have the last one as 6 other specify. So when you accept that and then you save your question, then you can see you have the ethnic race as your question. It is a must field question, and we have all these options provided. One has to select on one, and you can't select on 2 options. Then the last field would be, for that section, would be the marital status. So an easier way of doing this, like I have shown you in the past, is to copy and paste, then indicate the variable name. In this case is question number 9, marital status. It's a required field, and then for the options I've shown you an easier way of doing it. So copy all these, copy, then paste. So we have the first option as married, the second option as single, the third option as widowed, the fourth option as divorced, the fifth option as separated. And then once you hit the save button, then you have all these options allocated to the responses that you have given. We have 1 assigned to married, 2 assigned to single, and so on. So when you accept, then you save your question as shown. Now I want to take you back to the question on ethnic race, where we had the first option as white, the second option as African American, the third one as Asian, and I want to draw your attention to the other specify here. So we have not provided the space to provide these specifications. So in such a case, we will add a field here. We will change the field type to be a text or short text field type, and then we will say here that this is other race specify. So we want to provide room for someone to specify their race in case it was not outlined in the provided options. So the variable name here will be question 8a, and then here we'll say this is other race. So we will need a branching logic here, so there is no validation here, so we'll inform them to specify their race. We will require the participant to specify their race and save. This question should only appear if someone chooses other specify for the preceding question. So we will need to introduce a branching logic here. There are two ways of handling the branching logic. One is, if you know the code, you can comfortably type in here the branching logic. However, for our case, into today's demonstration, we will use the drag and drop logic builder. We want to look for the question where the response is other specify for the option race. So we realize that this is question number 8 on race, and then we want them to have specified other specify for that question to be relevant. So you drag and drop, and then the question will be available for filling if all the following are true. So if only the response for the previous question is other specify, that is when now this question will arise. So once you save, so you will notice that REDCap has introduced a branching logic where this question becomes relevant if question 8, the previous question, someone has selected other specify. Now we can move on to the next section. In this case, it is the section on water and sanitation section. But before we introduce the section, we need first of all to indicate the first question under that section. So as usual, we add a field and then we copy the question and paste it on REDCap so we can align it properly. What is the source of drinking water for your household? So this is question 10, then water source. So we don't have a validation. What we need to change is that this question is a select all that apply. So we need someone to be able to select 2 or more sources of water for their household. So in such a case, we'll change these into check boxes for multiple select. So the options are piped, borehole, and so on. So we copy all the options and paste them on the space provided. Then we need to align these properly. So the first response is piped water, borehole. And then from the well, the third is from the spring, the fourth is from rainwater, the fifth is river water, and then we have other specify as our last option. So the next thing is to put in the field note. So if you click anywhere, REDCap first will assign numbers to your responses. If you say close, seems like we do not have all the options selected, so we will need to assign these numbers ourselves. So in case such a thing happens, you can arrange the numbers. So you have the second one there, we have the third option, we have the fourth option, we have the fifth, sixth, and seventh option. Let's remove the commas. So you have your options listed down there. We have 1 allocated to piped water, 2 allocated to borehole, 3 allocated to well, 4 allocated to spring, 5 to rainwater, 6 to river water, 7 to other specified. So we make this a required field, and then we inform the person entering this information to select all that apply. So if you save, I want you to notice the difference between this question and the previous one. So the previous question only has one response. This question allows someone to select several responses in the same question. So you need to remember that you have gotten into another section, so you need to add the section title for that piece. So we change the field type to begin a new section, and then this section is labeled water and sanitation. So you copy and paste, then save. So water and sanitation section will appear, and then we can add the second question under that section. So this question would be, what kind of toilet does your household have? Paste. Then this is a single select question, so you go back to multiple choice radio button, or you can use multiple choice drop down lists as a single answer. So click on that. Variable name, this is question 11 underscore toilet, then make it a compulsory question, choose one response. Then the options that we have is copy those ones and paste them here. So now we know that you have 1 followed by a comma, and then we have 2 followed by a comma, and then we have 3, 4, then we have 5, then we have 6. Now that we know how to arrange the responses, we can clearly write the expected format. So we have 1 comma flush toilet, 2 comma, and then the option that is provided until we get to the last one, which is 6 comma other specified. Then we save our question. So realize that in this case we have the options listed down, and then one is expected only to choose one. So for the previous question, we had the option of someone choosing other response, and then they would be expected to specify. In that case, we would need to introduce a question here for the specification. So what we need to do is copy the question. So you can copy this question, copy, and then create a new question which will only be relevant if the previous question is other specified. So this will be a short text field, and then we can make the form, can make the question to specify the other type of source of drinking water. So in this case we have, what is your source of drinking water for your household? We will need to ask, what is the other source of drinking water for your household? Specify. And then this will be question 10a, other source of water. Then we make this one compulsory, and then here we say specify the source of water. Save. So we need to introduce a branching logic here. This question will only be available if the respondent selected other water source as their response for question 10, then save. So the same case will apply for what kind of toilet does your household have. If they select other type of toilet, then we'll expect them to specify. So in this case, we want to give provision for that. So we copy the question, copy, save here, then add a new field. So this new field will be a short text, paste. Then the question will be, what other kind of toilet does your household have? Then specify. Then this will be question 11 underscore other toilet. And make this compulsory. Then you can put instructions, specify the toilet type, then save. However, we need to introduce a branching logic. So an easier way is to use the drag and drop. So other toilet specify, then save. Now we are almost done with the questionnaire. So we are getting into the last section of this questionnaire, which is pain management section. So we will first of all create the question: have you experienced pain in the last 6 months? This is a binary question, so the easiest way is to copy the question and then add a new field, then select radio button, then paste, align your question. So the question now reads, have you experienced pain in the last 6 months? This is question 12_pain. It's a compulsory question. Then since we had used the yes no responses, it's possible to copy existing choices from a previous question. So if you click on copy existing choice, you can see we have yes no response here. So if you click on this, then it saves you on time for which you would have spent typing the responses. So it's a required field, and then we can remind the respondent to choose one response. Then you save. Then notice that the previous question determines which subsequent questions to be seen by the respondent. So in this case, question 13 depends on whether someone filled a yes in the previous question. So we will copy this question using the usual way, paste, and this question we'll just write pain score. This is question 13, pain score. Make it a required field, and then we want to introduce a slider where 1 is small pain and 10 is excruciating pain. So this one will go into the field notes. Copy this information here and put it in the field note. Paste. Change the field type to a slider. Select the slider, and then labels displayed above the slider, which is optional. So left label would be 1, middle label would be 5, and the extreme right will be 10. The minimum would be 1 and the maximum would be 10. So this is less pain. This would be excruciating pain. This would be moderate pain. Then it's optional to display the number of values, so we can activate that or leave it hidden. However, I think it is important to show your respondent which number they are selecting. So then save your question, and you see now we have the slider here showing whether someone has more pain or less pain. So we need a branching logic here again, since this question is only relevant if the participant selected that they had pain. So we click on the branching logic, and I showed you an easier way of doing it is using the drag and drop logic builder. So select the previous question, which is question 12, and this response would only be relevant if the participant had pain in the last 6 months. Then save. The next is, what did you do to manage your pain? It is a single select question. So you copy, then add a field, paste the question, then change the field type. This time round it's a multiple choice question with radio buttons for single response. So this is question 14_action. Make it a required field, and then the responses will be copy the responses, paste them here, and then since we know how REDCap is working on the responses, so you can say 1, arrange the choices in a way that REDCap would understand them. Then you save your question. Remember, this question is relevant if the participant said they had pain. So notice that right now we have changed the order in which the responses have been arranged. So this time round the responses are arranged in a horizontal format. However, you can always turn this back into your normal way. So you go back to edit and then custom the alignment. I prefer right and vertical. the vertical way of arranging these responses makes it easier for someone to select a single response without mixing up the responses. The last question is question number 15, where you expect someone to indicate the interviewer's name. So add a field, paste interviewer name. This is question 15 underscore int interviewer name. Make this compulsory, and then if you have a list of individuals who will be doing the interview or entering this information, you can paste their names and then arrange these options in a way which REDCap would understand the responses. So we have the first option as John, second one as Mary, the third interviewer as Alice. Save. So once you have done this, then you have your form fully done. So you can decide to preview the instrument by clicking on preview. And then you would see the first response here would be record ID, interview date, time of the interview in hours, consent form signed, it's a single select, so you have either select yes or no. Then we have the first section as demographic information, where we had several questions. The first question is the participant ID, first name, last name, telephone number, date of birth, age in complete years, gender, ethnic race, and we have all these options provided. And then we have other race specify. This question will only appear if the previous question was other. We will test that in the real format. Then we have marital status. One can only have one response for this. Then we have the second section, which is water and sanitation section. The first question is a multiple select. What are the sources of drinking water for your household? This question should only pop up if they selected other specify for the previous question, and so on. So one last thing that we have not indicated in our form is the section head for the pain management, and since we have realized that, then we can go back to edit view and then introduce the section on pain score before the question on have you experienced pain in the last 6 months. So we will add a field, then specify the field type to begin a new section. Then we copy pain management section, copy, then paste here. So once we save, we expect that the pain management section will be indicated. So we have managed to transform our form into REDCap. So we have ensured that all the questions that were on the prescribed form are now available into our REDCap form. So the next thing that we want to do is to enter data into the household questionnaire. So we will click on add edit records, and once we have clicked on the add edit record, then we can select a record if we have previous records that we have been entered. However, since this is our first record, then we will add a new record, and then this will give us the first record ID. So we want to fill in dummy data for this form, and I will take you through how to save the form and how to extract the datasets from this form. So let us look through how to fill in the form. So the interview date is today, and then you can either use the calendar or use the today option, and it will select for you the date for today. Time of interview in hours, we can select time in hours and also adjust the minutes using the second slider. And once we are comfortable that we have selected the time, then we say okay. Consent form signed, and then we have the participant ID, say 1230, and then participant first name is James, last name is John, and then telephone number, and then date of birth should be a past date, so we can select using the calendar. This must have been in March. We have several options here, 1970, and then the date is 17th 1970. So age in complete years, you need to do the calculations. So this is around 54 1 years. Gender is male. Ethnic race, we want to test whether our branching logic is working, so we can select other specify, and as you can see we have other specify option resulting. Then we can specify here which that other race that we need to specify. So this is a black Indian. And then we need to know whether the participant is married, so this participant is married. And then what is your source of drinking water for your household? You can select either of these, and if you select other specify, then we'll have the option for you to specify other sources of water, and in this case we will type water delivered by tankers. Then what kind of toilet does your household have? It's a drop down menu, and we'll say this is a pit latrine with slab. Have you experienced pain in the last 6 months? If you say no, then the rest of the questions should not appear. If you say yes, additional questions will appear. So notice as you are reviewing this form, this question which needed to be accompanied by a branching logic, so you can always go back to your form designing and then adjust, make this correction to ensure that if someone selects no, then the next question is to end the interview. So now that we've gotten to that point, we will select here yes, the patient had pain, and then the amount of pain was not as much pain, so the pain score is 3. And then what did you do to manage the pain? They visited a doctor, and that is all. So the interviewer name is John, and we want to save this form as unverified, although you have several options in which you can save the form. So for the first type, you can save the form as incomplete if you have additional information that you want to come back to this form and enter. For example, if you don't know what the participant did after they experienced the pain, so you can leave this question and then call the participant, and then when you come back later, once you have the information, you can always put in the information and then change this to unverified. The reason why you save the form as unverified is that you want someone else to come and look through what you have entered in the form, if it corresponds to the accurate responses, and then once they have verified the form, then it can be changed into complete. So for now we'll save it as unverified and then save the form and exit. So we have filled in one form, however we have a correction that we need to make. So we'll go back to the designer part, choose the questionnaire. We need to introduce the branching logic for the last question. So scroll to the last question on what did you do to manage your pain. Click on the branching logic. An easier way is to use the drag and drop option. We know that this question needs to appear if and only if the patient claims to have experienced pain in the last 6 months. So you save, and you can see now the branching logic has been implemented. So if we go back to filling a new form, go back to add and edit record. So we add a new record. So in this case we have record number 2. Interview date, we can use the today option. Interview hours, we can select these to be 4, and then we have 11, then we say done. Then was a consent form signed? Yes. And then participant ID 21540. First name is Amos Bill. Telephone is 6925. Then date of birth, so this participant was born in 1930, January 1st. Age in completed years, 91 years, is male, is black or African American, he is widowed, he gets his water from a spring, and then he uses a VIP toilet. And then you can notice now we do not have the optional question showing up, so those questions will only show up if we select yes. So it means that our form now is functional. So if we select no, then the next question is the interviewer's name, and then this form is complete. So we'll just say unverified and wait for someone to come and verify our form. Then the next thing that we can do is save the form and exit. So we'll put in several questions. So we go to add and edit record, add a new record. So this is record number 3. Interview date is past interview date, the time when it was done. You can use this tab to click on today's time, and then consent form signed, yes. Participant ID, we need to select a different participant ID. This needs to be unique. First name, we call this Mary Humphrey. Telephone number, date of birth, we can say this is was born in 1990, September 12th. Age in complete years, this is 31. The participant is female, she's white, she's single. Where does she get drinking water for the household? So they have piped water, and they also gather rainwater from the roof. Then what kind of toilet does your household have? So they have a pit latrine without a slab. And then, have you experienced pain in the last 6 months? So in this case we have yes. What type of pain? So we can increase the score to 8. And then, what did you do to manage your pain? She took herbal medicine. Then, who was the interviewer? In this case we have Alice. So we save the form as unverified and exit. So if we want to know how many records have been entered, you click on record status dashboard, and you can see so far we have been able to enter 3 records. So for the verifying individual, so they will come back to the list of the forms that have been entered, and then click on each of these. So they review the form, they check whether the interview date was entered correctly, time of interview, whether it was entered correctly, and this needs to be counter-checked with the paper form in case data was not entered straight into REDCap. So they counter-check that all the information through the form was well entered, and once they are satisfied that all the required fields have been correctly entered, then they change the status of the form to be complete. Once they have done that, then they save the form, and you will notice that the color of the round button here changes to green. So this means that this form has been verified and the data that is contained in it is correct. Then the verifier needs to open the remaining forms and do the same. So open form number 2. Go through question by question, checking whether the details that have been entered are accurate, and once they are satisfied, then they change the status of the form to complete status. Then finally save the form and exit. Looking at the record status dashboard, you have 2 out of the 3 forms verified. So until all the forms have been verified and saved as complete, then that is when now we can use the data for analysis. So open the 3rd form, check all the required information, they have been entered correctly, and once the information has been verified, then the status of the form can be changed into complete. Now I want to show you how to derive the data dictionary from this form. So you can click on the dictionary format and then download the current data dictionary. So if you click this, you will be in a position to download the dictionary, and we can view how the dictionary has been formed. So to make it easier for you to see, we can freeze panels here so that as we slide you can see how the questions are arranged. So we have the variable name, which is a field name for that particular form, and then those variables have been subdivided into various sections. We have the 3 sections: demographic information section, water and sanitation section, pain management section, and then the variables had different field types, and we've mentioned that to be text, radio, checkbox, drop down, we have a slider and radio as such. So each variable name has a field label, and we said that this is the question that is visible to the person entering data on REDCap. And then we have choices and calculations or slider labels as outlined. So each variable name has its own respective responses. And then we have, for those questions that had field notes, so that is the outline of the field notes in the form dictionary. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we had some questions which required validation. So like the question on the interview date, the date format ought to have been day, month, and year. We have the telephone number being an integer, we have the age being an integer, and then we have the pain score being an integer. Then we had two questions which had a minimum and a maximum value. That is question on age. The minimum age was supposed to be 18, the maximum had to be 150 years. The pain score had to a range of between 1 and 10, and then the branching logic. So someone had to respond to the other race if the question on race was other specify. Other water source, one had to respond to that question if the previous question, which was number 10, the response was other, which was denoted by 7, and what was saved ought to have been 1. Then the question on other toilets to specify had to show up if the question on toilet one selected other toilet specified. These two questions on pain score and the action taken on while on pain were to be filled if one specified that they had pain. So all the questions in our questionnaire were all required. We filled in the required field to be yes all through. Then the alignment, so there is only one question where we mentioned that the alignment ought to be the right hand side. The other bit of the responses, we will discuss this in our future presentations. So let us now look at how to export data from our forms. So we will click on data export and statistics. So I want to show you how to export data from REDCap. So once you click data export reports and statistics, then you can click on export data. REDCap will give you several options within which you can use to export your data. One of them is you can export the data in CSV format as a Microsoft Excel using raw data. So we can start off all by clicking on the first one and then export this data. So you have other options here of claiming whether you need to download the data with identifiers or free text or with date field. So this is optional, but for now let's just look at what kind of data we have. So once you click on export, then you need to download the raw data. Click on the raw data Excel CSV tab, then you close. So data will be downloaded into your folder. So as you can see, we have our data downloaded in CSV format. This is a format that you can read using Excel. So we have 3 records entered. This is the interview date, the time, whether the participant had provided consent, the names of the participants, the telephone number, date of birth, age, the responses in values. So here we have gender 1 or 2, and this is dependent on the kind of way you wanted your data to be downloaded. So you can decide whether you want values or you want the labels showing. So in our case here, we selected the values, and as you can see, we can only have values stored into our data set unless we have other specifications where text values were entered. Otherwise, all the values are clearly entered and they are correctly entered for our three records. So I want to show you another format. So you can click export data, but in this case you want to have the labels showing. So export, then download the data set, close. I want you to see the difference. So open the data set. So in this case we have the interview date, interview in hours. Now check the difference on these variables. Was the consent form signed? So we have yes, 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 and not as previously done with numbers. So if you download the CSV format with labels, then you will not see the values, but you will see the actual responses for each question. So in this case we have consent form signed, we have yes instead of 1, and this happens to all the other questions. So all those questions that had value labels, then you will not see the value, but you will see the label. So in this case we have gender, we have male instead of 1, and we have female instead of 2. The same case with ethnic race, we have other specifier instead of a numeric value, and this cuts across all the values, all the questions within that questionnaire. So there are other formats under which you can download your dataset. So in this case we have, if you are using SPSS statistical software, REDCap is able to provide you a format that is compatible with SPSS. Same case with SAS, you can be able to download data that is compatible with SAS software. You can be able to download data that is compatible with R statistical software. You can also be able to download data that is compatible with Stata statistical software, as well as XML format. The other thing that I would like to show you is how to look at the charts. So at a glance, you can monitor how your data is being entered by looking at simple graphs, histograms that REDCap is able to generate for you. So in this case, we have every question that has been answered, and then for those questions that have numeric entries, you can see the frequencies and the distribution of those questions. So you can see here a bar graph for the question on consent form signed. So if all the participants signed our consent, then we expect that this will be 100%. But in case we have a few participants who did not sign their informed consent, then we'd have a proportion of that. And then it's possible to download this image and probably put it in a presentation at a quick glance. Then for questions that have numeric entries, it's possible to get the maximum, the minimum, the standard deviation, though this information is not relevant for the telephone number. But in case we had a question like weight or height, then this scatter plot might be useful. Date of birth, you can see now here a variation where we had 2 male participants and 1 female participant. The histogram is displaying this information to us. Then at a glance you can be able to tell how this information is being filled on real time. So in case there are questions with missing entries, then it's possible to tell which questions have missing entry. Like in this case, only 2 questions were responded to for the pain management. And then we have 1 question which did not have this response responded to. And you can click on this hyperlink, and then REDCap will take you straight into the question that had a missing entry. So REDCap has a lot of advantages which you should be in a position to benefit from. On the last thing, once you have noticed that your form is capturing the data as expected and all the fields are working as expected, the next thing is to push your data into production. And how to do that is you go to the project home, project setup, then you can push this project into production. Once you push the project into production, then you will be expected to specify whether you want to retain the pilot data that you are using to check whether the forms are working properly, or you drop all that dummy data. So most of the times you would wish to delete all the pilot data from the form, and then once you have done that, you push the form into production. Then REDCap will give you an alert that all the data that you had previously entered into the piloting phase of the form will be deleted. So once you say OK, REDCap will tell you that the project now is in production. Now the other thing that we want to do is to add users to our project. You can see here the project has been pushed into production, and once you have pushed the project into production, it becomes very difficult for you to start making changes. Once you make those changes, they need to be approved through a process. So it would be very important for you to spend time piloting the form, checking whether there are any errors, sending the form to reviewers. Take as much time as possible to review the form before it is pushed into production. So once you have pushed your project into production, the next thing is to add the users. So you can scroll down to the section where you have user rights and permissions. You can click on user rights, and as you can see, for now I'm the only one who has access to this project. So you can use this option to add users who are already REDCap users, and then you can customize their rights under this project. So that in a nutshell is how you create a project on REDCap, develop a data collection form using the web designer, and I've also taken you through how to enter data using the already created tool. I have also shown you how to push the project into production, and I have demonstrated how to retrieve data from REDCap for statistical analysis. That brings me to the end of today's presentation. Looking forward to seeing you in my next presentation. Thank you.